I still remember the email notification. All hands meeting, mandatory, 9:30 a.m., main conference room. It came in at 8:12 on a Thursday morning, too early for anything good. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I'd worked in corporate long enough to know that tone. No subject line, no details, just urgency wrapped in vague professionalism. The kind of message that doesn't say layoffs, but screams it anyway. My name is Samantha Ray. I'm 34. And for the past 8 years, I worked at Delta Core Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm in Portland. Or rather, I lived there. I was the one who stayed late when servers went down, who skipped lunches to review compliance documents, who quietly retrained employees when onboarding dropped the ball. When the pandemic hit and everyone else panicked, I learned new systems overnight, updated our protocols by hand, and kept the place afloat. But on that Thursday morning, none of it mattered. I walked into the conference room and felt the hush immediately. People sat stiffly, coffee cups clutched tightly like talismans. No one made eye contact. I sat near the back, my heart thudding so loudly I could barely hear the soft murmur of nervous whispers around me. Then the doors opened, and in walked Alan Reese, our chief operating officer, flanked by 2 HR reps. That's when it became real. "Thank you for joining us this morning," Alan began, like this was just another company update. "Today, we've made the incredibly difficult decision to initiate a round of workforce reductions." He paused as if expecting sympathy. "This is part of a necessary restructuring as we align our budgets with future growth strategies." I wasn't shocked by the layoff itself. I'd heard the rumors like everyone else. What stunned me was when I checked my email 5 minutes later and saw the subject line, "Your employment status." And there it was. My name was on the list. First. I sat there frozen, reading the sterile paragraph over and over, unable to breathe. After everything I'd done, the extra hours, the missed birthdays, the Sunday nights spent fixing data mismatches, they didn't even have the decency to speak to me in person. I'd worked double shifts. I'd fixed critical bugs before they made it to launch. I was the only one in the company with a current Level 3 compliance certification, a credential they begged me to get, then never reimbursed me for. I stood up, slowly, aware that people were watching. Some had tears in their eyes. A few looked guilty, but no one said anything. At my desk, there was already a cardboard box waiting. Security didn't escort me, a tiny mercy, I guess. But as I packed up 8 years of my life, I couldn't stop shaking. Family photos. A stress ball shaped like a server tower. The coffee mug I won for Employee of the Quarter. Twice. 8 years, gone in 6 paragraphs. No severance package. Just 2 weeks insurance coverage and an offer to assist with my transition. The worst part? I didn't cry. I wanted to. I wanted to scream, slam a chair against the wall, demand answers. But all I did was nod. Quietly, like a professional. Like someone who hadn't just been gutted. When I stepped out into the gray Oregon drizzle, I wasn't just unemployed. I was untethered. Everything I had built my identity around, loyalty, hard work, being the one who held it all together, had just been treated like it meant nothing. I put the box in my car and sat behind the wheel for a long time. No music, no calls, just silence. I stared at my reflection in the rain-smeared window, and for the first time in a long time, I saw someone exhausted, used, discarded. But then, as the shock began to fade, something else began to rise. A quiet fury. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. They didn't let me go because of budget cuts. They let me go because I made things look easy. Because I trained the team so well they thought I could be replaced by the people I mentored. Because I never asked for credit, never made noise, and never threatened to leave. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Because 2 weeks before they blindsided me with that email, I had a conversation. One I hadn't told anyone about yet. Not even my closest friend in the company. It was with a recruiter from Calum Tech, a global cybersecurity and compliance firm. And as I sat there in my car, still clutching the layoff notice, my phone buzzed with a new message. Hi, Samantha. Congrats again. Legal has finalized your contract. We'd love to schedule onboarding for Monday. Welcome to Calum Tech Six Figures. Full benefits, remote flexibility, a role built around the very skills Delta Core had taken for granted. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. They thought they were punishing me. But what they'd actually done was set me free. The Monday after my layoff, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. out of habit. No alarm, just muscle memory. For 8 years, that time meant brewing coffee, reviewing the ticket backlog, checking my team's schedules, and prepping for yet another urgent compliance meeting that should have been solved months ago. But that morning, I sat still at the kitchen table. No rush, no emails, no panicked Slack messages. Just the silence of my small Portland apartment. And the contract for my new job at Calum Tech, still sitting on the counter. I didn't sign it yet. Not because I had doubts, but because part of me needed time to mourn. Not the company. That was long gone. I was mourning who I had to become to survive in a place that never saw me. Back when I started at Delta Core, I was just 26. I'd landed the job after getting certified in risk and compliance systems. Not exactly a glamorous field, but one that required meticulous thinking, nerves of steel, and most of all, accountability. I was eager, sharp, hungry to prove myself. And for a while, I did. I stayed late to fix botched reports. I found discrepancies in regulatory filings that saved us from audit fines. I volunteered to mentor new hires. I was the go-to, the reliable one. You know what happens to the reliable one? They get buried in expectations. At first, it felt like trust. I was looped into high-level meetings, CC'd on everything. But soon I was doing everything. Writing documentation that wasn't mine. Fixing code I didn't break. Picking up calls after hours, just in case. When someone missed a deadline, I handled it. When a new hire was floundering, Samantha, can you just shadow them for a week? By year 4, I was basically running onboarding for the entire compliance division. Unofficially, of course. No title change. No raise. Just a slow shift into invisibility. My manager, Drew, always said the same thing. We know how valuable you are, Sam. You're the glue. Glue. I hated that word. Glue holds everything together. Quietly, messily, unseen. And when it breaks, people don't blame the load. They blame the glue. I wasn't resentful at first. I told myself it would pay off. That loyalty meant something. Then came the new hires. Fresh out of grad school, underqualified, overconfident, and assigned directly to me. Samantha, can you train Jason on the compliance dashboard? Samantha, just loop Priya in. She'll be shadowing you. At one point, I was training 4 people while still doing my actual job. But it was a conversation from about 6 months before the layoff that stayed with me. It was after hours, and Drew had stopped by my desk while I was still typing out a critical client compliance report. You know, if we had 5 more Sams, this place would run itself. I gave a tired smile. Then maybe you'd let one of them have weekends off. He laughed. I didn't. Later that week, I submitted my first request for a compensation review. I outlined my certifications, project metrics, and team development work. I attached glowing client emails, positive audits, and even included market salary comparisons. Drew's reply came 48 hours later. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to adjust salaries this quarter. Let's revisit this in 6 months. 6 months later, I sent a follow-up. No reply. Instead, 2 months after that, I got an email asking me to lead compliance training for the entire company. No title. No bonus. Just more hours. More unpaid labor. I did it anyway. Because I still had hope. I still believed that showing up, really showing up, mattered. I didn't know it then, but that was the final test. And I passed it. Just not in the way they expected. The recruiter from Calum Tech reached out shortly after that training session. She'd been forwarded one of the internal guides I'd written. Anonymously, of course. It had circulated among their consultants as a gold standard in practical compliance rollout. They wanted to talk. I took the call. Quietly, cautiously. I told myself it was just a conversation. But the moment I spoke to their director of operations, I realized how much I'd been starving. Not just financially, but professionally. He knew what my certifications meant. He asked about the systems I'd patched. He valued the quiet work no one else ever saw. And then I got the offer. 6 figures. Leadership title. My own team. It felt surreal. I hadn't accepted it yet when the layoff came. But when it did, it was like the universe answered for me. All those years I thought I was too essential to be discarded. But they had never valued me, only what I could do for them. And now, they were about to find out what happened when the glue walks away. Because 2 weeks later, almost to the day, Delta Core's compliance systems failed. And there was only one person who knew how to fix them. And she had just signed her contract with someone else. The email went out at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Subject, urgent compliance system error. It was forwarded to me later by a former coworker. But at that moment, I was already sipping an iced coffee across town, sitting in a sleek glass office with my new Calum Tech badge clipped to my blazer. It had been 9 days since I left Delta Core. 9 days since I quietly packed up my desk, smiled at the receptionist, and walked out of that building for the last time. It felt like a lifetime ago. But for them, the real nightmare had just begun. Inside Delta Core's 7th floor office, panic was setting in. The compliance dashboard, the core system tracking client certifications, regulatory deadlines, and audit documentation had gone down. Not partially, fully. No access, no backups loading, no functioning escalation path. The issue wasn't just technical, it was operational. The new team had deployed an update to the internal tracking system. The same system I had manually patched and maintained for 6 years. It was never meant to be automated blindly. The protocols were too nuanced, too dependent on knowing the quirks and exceptions we'd built around client-specific regulations. But I was gone, and no one else knew the map. I got the first text from Jenna, one of the few people who'd reached out after the layoffs. "Are you hearing what's happening at Delta Core? It's a disaster." Then Thomas, from IT, messaged me. "Compliance system down. No one can even explain what went wrong. Drew looks like he's aged 10 years in an hour." I didn't reply, not because I didn't care. A small part of me still did. But because I knew better than to get emotionally pulled back in. I'd spent years being their backup plan, their patch, their fixer. And where had that gotten me? Laid off, without warning, without gratitude. Number this time, they would face it without me. By Thursday morning, word had spread. 3 major clients were threatening to pause contracts. One, a government-adjacent tech firm, had already frozen operations pending audit confirmation. I heard Drew had locked himself in his office, frantically flipping through old email chains and half-written process manuals I'd left behind. The problem? I never documented the fail-safes. I couldn't. The system wasn't designed for it. Half the fixes I'd done were hard-coded overrides built over years of trial, error, and emergency intervention. They hadn't just let go of an employee. They had deleted their institutional memory. By noon, I got a call. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Hi, Samantha. It's Drew." There was a pause. I could hear tension in his voice. I waited. How are you?" he asked. The sheer awkwardness of that small talk after everything made me want to laugh, but I kept my tone neutral. "I'm well, settling into the new position." "Listen," he said, quickly shifting gears. "I won't waste your time. We've had some issues with the compliance dashboard. You were the only one who really understood how the override system worked, and I was wondering if—" "Drew," I said gently, "I no longer work at Delta Core." I know, he rushed. "I'm not asking for anything big. Just maybe a call? Walk us through some of the old patches, or—" I let the silence hang for a second longer than was comfortable. I'm not trying to be difficult, I said, but I did ask for compensation for this work. For years. You remember that, don't you? He went quiet. Now, I'm leading the compliance architecture team at Calum Tech, I continued, and I'm building something better, cleaner, sustainable. I get it, he muttered. No, Drew, I don't think you do, I said, keeping my voice even. You didn't value the system while it worked because you never saw how fragile it was. And now that it's broken, you're realizing the cost. He exhaled sharply. Is there anyone else we could talk to? Anyone you trained who could help? That part broke me a little. Because yes, I trained half the team. I wrote the guides. I answered the late-night texts. But none of them had the experience. They weren't ready. And worse, they had been too afraid to speak up when I was dismissed. I gave him the cleanest answer I could. You're going to need to rebuild it from scratch, and I suggest hiring a team who won't treat your best people as disposable next time. The call ended shortly after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I had finally drawn a line in the sand between who I was, the glue that held a broken system together, and who I was becoming, the architect of something new. At Calum Tech, I was being invited to redesign a nationwide compliance platform. They trusted me, listened to me, paid me fairly. My calendar wasn't filled with emergencies. It was filled with strategy. That night, as I looked out at the city lights from my balcony, I received one final message. It was from Jenna. They brought in a consultant today. He told them it would take 4 to 6 months to rebuild what you did in-house. And that's just to get back to baseline. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things don't need a response. Let the silence speak. Because they hadn't just lost a system. They lost the one person who knew how to keep it from collapsing. And that finally wasn't my problem anymore. It wasn't until week 3 at Calum Tech that I finally started sleeping through the night. The insomnia had followed me like a shadow after the layoff. Not because I missed Delta Core, that chapter was closed. But because even in freedom, I carried the habits they'd hardwired into me. The urgency, the hypervigilance, the need to be useful. For the first time in years, no one needed me at 11 p.m. There were no frantic, just one more favor messages, no missing audit flags waiting for me to catch them. It was unsettling and healing. My team at Calum Tech was small but sharp, and they listened. During onboarding, I suggested a shift in how we structured internal compliance mapping, and instead of dismissing me, the CTO brought it up in a leadership meeting. It was implemented the same week. I wasn't used to that. Every day, I woke up waiting for the catch, waiting for someone to tell me I'd overstepped or been too ambitious, but it never came. Instead, I got Slack messages asking for my thoughts. I got credit in meetings. I got a full lunch hour, uninterrupted. When I sent an out-of-office email, people actually respected it. The scars didn't vanish, but they stopped itching. Still, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the texts that kept trickling in from old Delta Core coworkers, people who had survived the layoffs but now felt like the floor was crumbling beneath them. You were right, Samantha. They're overworking everyone. 3 people quit this week. No one trusts Drew anymore. They finally offered Priya a promotion, after 2 people left. She's furious. I didn't respond to all of them, but I read every word. Because I remembered what it felt like to sit at that desk, to hear the silence after advocating for yourself, to smile through resentment just to survive another day. That's when an idea started forming. On a quiet Friday afternoon, I walked into my new director's office and asked if I could spearhead a mentorship initiative, one focused on career transition support for under-recognized compliance professionals. He blinked. You want to mentor people? Outside the company? Yes, I said. People who are stuck in broken systems. People like I used to be. To my surprise, he nodded almost immediately. Put together a proposal. I'll support it. That weekend, I wrote the framework for a pro bono workshop series, 1 Saturday a month. Resume audits, interview prep. negotiation tactics, confidence building. I called it the Invisible Experts Project. Because too many of us work in silence, afraid to ask for more, afraid to leave, because we're told the glue doesn't matter. That being essential is enough reward. It isn't. 2 weeks later, I held the first session. 5 women from various industries joined the Zoom call. They were quiet at first, unsure if they belonged, unsure if they were allowed to want more. But by the end, one of them, a single mom named Janelle, said something I haven't forgotten. I thought I was failing because I was exhausted all the time, but maybe I'm just exhausted because I've been doing 3 people's jobs without credit. Exactly. That's the lie we're fed. That burnout is personal weakness, not systemic abuse. That loyalty is noble even when it's one-sided. That speaking up makes us difficult. It doesn't. It makes us free. After that session, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't expected. Priya, the junior analyst I'd trained during my last year at Delta Corps. Hi, Samantha. I heard about the workshop. I'd love to join. Also, I just gave my notice. You helped me see I deserved better. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized something important. They'd tried to erase me, discard me like a broken part. But I hadn't just built systems. I'd built people. People who now saw their own value. That was the real legacy. And the more I embraced that truth, the more I understood the difference between leaving quietly and leaving with purpose. I hadn't burned a bridge. I'd lit a torch and handed it to the next person still in the dark. It was a gray Tuesday morning when I saw the subject line. Urgent request? Contracted assistance? It came from a Delta Corps email address, but not Drew's. This one was from a name I hadn't heard in over a year. Karen Voss, the company's chief legal officer. I opened the message slowly, half curious, half expecting more corporate cleanup. Hi, Samantha. I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding a critical compliance situation. Our external consultants have advised that portions of our legacy system cannot be restored without direct input from the original architect. Based on our records, that's you. We understand you're no longer with Delta Corps, and we respect that. However, we'd like to discuss a potential contracted engagement with appropriate compensation to help stabilize our systems before Q4 filings. Please let us know if you're open to a conversation. Karen Voss, Chief Legal Officer. I read it twice, then a third time. There it was, the final act. Not a demand, not a guilt trip. A request. Polite, careful, professional. From someone far higher up than Drew. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even tempted. I just felt something settle, like a book being closed after years of rereading the same painful chapter. By now, Delta Corps had lost 3 major clients. Their internal reviews had flagged multiple compliance breaches, and their external audit report, which I got a glimpse of through a friend in the industry, was scathing. They didn't want me back out of respect. They wanted me back because I was the only one who could fix what they had broken. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't reply right away. I spent the day thinking. Not because I needed the job. I didn't. Calum Tech was thriving, and my mentorship initiative, the Invisible Experts Project, had grown faster than I imagined. I just wanted to be sure. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same place I had stared into the quiet the day I was laid off. The city below me was alive with lights, and inside, my inbox was filled with messages from mentees landing interviews, negotiating raises, and walking away from toxic jobs with their heads held high. I wasn't who I was a year ago, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I replied, "Hi, Karen. Thank you for your message. I appreciate the outreach, but I must respectfully decline. While I understand Delta Corps' current challenges, I believe my departure and the circumstances surrounding it offered an important lesson about valuing internal talent before they become external assets. I wish you the best as you move forward with your consultants. Samantha Ray." No bitterness, no ego, just truth. A few hours later, I got a short response. Understood. Thank you for your time. KV, I didn't need more. Closure doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes quietly, like finally stepping off a path that only led you in circles. 2 weeks after that, Calum Tech's board invited me to present our new modular compliance platform, a system I'd co-developed and would now lead into national deployment. At the end of the meeting, our CTO shook my hand and said, "This wouldn't have happened without you, Samantha. You didn't just help us build something, you helped change how we think about what leadership actually looks like." That stuck with me, because for years I thought leadership meant carrying everyone else, being the fixer, the last one out of the office, the quiet achiever. But real leadership? It's showing people their value before the breaking point. It's setting boundaries, not just picking up the slack. It's refusing to let your loyalty be weaponized against you. I used to think I was disposable. They made me believe that being useful was the same thing as being valued. But here, I wasn't just useful. I was seen. At the end of my presentation, I looked around that boardroom, at people who listened when I spoke, at systems built on trust, not desperation. And I realized I hadn't just found a new job. I had reclaimed my worth. One of my mentees, a woman named Leah who had recently left a hostile finance firm, said something in our last group session that brought tears to my eyes. I kept thinking I had to prove I was irreplaceable. But the truth is, I never was. I was just ignored. I told her what I had finally come to believe. You don't have to be irreplaceable to be valuable. You just have to believe that the right people will see you before it's too late. That's what Delta Corps never understood. They didn't lose me because I left. They lost me because they never believed I would. And by the time they realized what they had, I was already building something they'd never get access to again. Success isn't revenge. Self-respect is. And I had finally found mine. For 6 years, I gave everything I had to that company. Late nights, early mornings, missed birthdays, missed anniversaries. Hell, I even took Zoom calls from a hospital bed once, still groggy from surgery. I was the regional operations director for Elevar International. I managed over 200 employees, oversaw supply chain operations across 3 states, and streamlined a system that saved the company over $4 million in 12 months. But apparently, that didn't make me a real leader. I still remember the moment, the way their laughter hung in the air like cologne. We were in the executive lounge after a quarterly performance meeting. I'd just wrapped a successful presentation, and for once I thought maybe I'd earned a seat at the table. "So, the annual exec dinner's on Friday," said Brent, the VP of logistics, loosening his tie like he'd actually done anything that quarter. "Private chef, ocean view, imported wines, the usual." I smiled. "Sounds great. Where should I RSVP?" There was a pause. One beat too long. Brent smirked. "Oh, sorry, Lisa. It's for senior leadership only. You know, the core team. Real decision makers." He said it casually, like it was policy. Like I hadn't just crushed every single KPI they handed me. Across the room, Dana, head of finance, stifled a laugh behind her wine glass. "I'm sure you understand," she added. "We just want to keep it strategic." Strategic. Right. I nodded, lips tight. "Of course." But inside, something cracked. Not in the angry, screaming, flip the table way. Number, it was quieter than that. Colder. Something settled. Because I'd spent 6 years playing the game, working twice as hard, being twice as prepared, taking half the credit. And for what? To be told I wasn't one of them? To be reminded I was still on the outside looking in? Number not this time. That night, I went home and canceled my RSVP to the dinner. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started pulling receipts. Literally. You see, what Brent and Dana didn't realize, or maybe just didn't care about, was that I had access. As regional director, I handled logistics, yes, but that included travel approvals, corporate cards, expense reports, vendor payments. I didn't just see the numbers. I owned the system that processed them. And what I'd seen in the past few months didn't add up. Private charter flights to Napa Valley, luxury suites in Dubai. For client meetings that didn't show up in the CRM. Thousands spent at high-end spas in the Maldives, charged as team building. At first, I thought it was sloppy, arrogant. But as I dug deeper, it was intentional. A pattern, a system, a network of senior executives siphoning money through inflated vendor contracts and fake consulting invoices. All approved, all signed, all documented, by each other. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. A spreadsheet lit up in red, yellow, and green, the colors of corruption. Here's the thing most people forget. When you get left out, you see everything more clearly. Their blind spot? Thinking I'd just take the insult and keep my head down. Instead, I compiled a full report, cross-checked everything against the company's travel policy and federal compliance standards, flagged every violation, every suspicious signature, every transaction that reeked of fraud. Then I created a secure email. No name, no trace. Attached the files, typed just one line in the body. If you're serious about ethics, you'll want to look into this. And I sent it. To internal audit, to compliance, and directly to the board of directors. Then I closed the laptop and waited. The next few days were normal, on the surface. Brent still strolled around like he was untouchable. Dana still wore those $1,000 heels and handed out fake compliments like candy. But the storm was already brewing. I saw the signs first. Subtle things, meetings disappearing from calendars, compliance officers quietly flying into headquarters, the IT department suddenly working weekends. And then, on Monday morning, it hit. A company-wide memo, unscheduled. Subject line, urgent leadership review underway. By Wednesday, Brent was suspended pending investigation. Dana went on personal leave. 3 more senior execs disappeared from the org chart within 48 hours. And the executive dinner? Canceled. The memo didn't say why, but it didn't need to. I already knew. Because when you treat people like outsiders, when you use power to exclude and manipulate, eventually, someone fights back. Quietly. Efficiently. Like I did. They told me I wasn't a real leader, but leaders don't need lavish dinners or luxury retreats to prove their worth. Real leaders see the rot and remove it, even if it means burning the whole table down. The thing no one tells you about revenge? It's not the moment it hits. It's the silence that follows. The emails stop. The hallway chatter dies. People look at you just a little too long, but say a little too little. And you start to feel it, the weight of something shifting underneath your feet. By Thursday morning, it was no longer a rumor. Brent's nameplate had been removed from his office. Dana's car wasn't in the executive parking lot. 4 other directors, all part of the inner circle, were suddenly unavailable for comment. The exec floor was different. It used to buzz with false confidence, backslapping, wine-fueled banter. Now, it was like a courtroom before a verdict. Still, no one said anything to me. Not yet. I kept showing up, doing my job, saying little, watching everything. But then something happened I didn't expect. On Friday morning, I got an email with the subject line, Private Invitation, Ethics Review Interview. Attached, a time slot, 3:30 p.m., room 7C, internal audit. I stared at it for a long time, Because I'd sent the anonymous tip. I'd protected my tracks, used a throwaway server, scrubbed the metadata. It shouldn't trace back to me. But here I was, invited. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, answering emails, reviewing logistics updates, managing vendors. But my stomach twisted with every tick of the clock. When 3:30 hit, I walked into the audit floor where everything looked sterile. Too clean, like a place built to make people nervous. Room 7C was already open. 2 chairs, 1 long table, no glass, no windows, just a camera in the corner and a pitcher of untouched water. Across the table sat a woman in her 40s, crisp navy blazer, no expression. Her badge read, Andrea West, Corporate Compliance Director. She gestured to the chair opposite her. Ms. Harper, thank you for coming. I sat. Of course. She folded her hands, calm, measured. You've been with Elevar for how long? 6 years, I replied. Director of Regional Operations? Yes. She nodded. Impressive numbers. Your division's metrics have been some of the best this company has seen. I said nothing. I wasn't here to be flattered. She leaned forward slightly. We're conducting a formal investigation into misuse of company funds. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to answer honestly. Nothing will leave this room without your consent unless it's legally required. Understood? I nodded. She pulled out a thin file, opened it. Then, to my surprise, she smiled, just slightly. Ms. Harper, let me be direct. We already know it was you. I blinked. Excuse me? The anonymous report. The metadata was clean, yes. The timing wasn't. The documents you included were pulled directly from internal routing systems, and most of them had your clearance level. I stared. Andrea continued, unbothered. We cross-referenced submission logs, internal access timestamps, routing IDs. It all leads here. I didn't deny it. I couldn't. So instead, I said the only thing that made sense. Are you here to fire me? Andrea shook her head. No, Lisa. Quite the opposite. She closed the file. What you did took courage, precision, integrity. If even a fraction of what's in your report holds up. And from what we've seen, it does. You didn't just uncover financial fraud. You saved Elevar from potential federal charges. I exhaled. Slowly. She leaned in. But I need to ask you one question, for the record. Pause. Why didn't you come forward openly? I hesitated, then said, because when I wasn't invited to the executive dinner, I realized I wasn't part of their circle. And people outside the circle don't survive calling it out. They disappear. Quietly. Andrea didn't speak for a moment. Then she nodded, slowly. You're right. That's how it's been. But that ends now. She slid a document across the table. Confidential. Internal use only. At the top, executive misconduct and restructuring recommendations. 6 names, all flagged for immediate removal. Effective Monday, she said. The company will begin formal action. But there's one more thing we need. I looked up. She held out a separate folder. Slim, unmarked. This is a transition brief. We want you to step in, temporarily, as acting vice president of operations, to stabilize the department during the fallout. I froze. Me? The woman who wasn't invited to the dinner? I took the folder. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. Andrea stood. We'll support you fully. You just need to decide if you're ready. I stood too. Looked her in the eyes. I've been ready for 6 years. As I walked out of room 7C, the world looked different. The walls, the lights, even the people. They hadn't changed. I had. Because the moment they excluded me, they thought they'd pushed me down. But all they really did was give me the high ground. And I was just getting started. When Monday came, I didn't drive to my usual parking lot. I took the ramp to the executive garage, the one with license plate scanners and valet service. No one stopped me. No one questioned anything. My clearance had already been updated. As I stepped into the private elevator alone, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Same black blazer, same minimalist makeup, same steady eyes. But this wasn't the same Lisa Harper. This Lisa wasn't asking for a seat at the table. She was the table now. When the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, it was like stepping into a silent battlefield. Desks cleared, offices empty. You could feel the ghosts of the recently removed, Brent, Dana, and their smug little alliance, still hanging in the air. A few heads turned as I walked past, not out of greeting, but recognition. Whispers followed me like shadows. She's the one. She's the reason they got fired. Is she the new VP? I didn't stop, didn't flinch, just walked straight into the corner office that used to belong to Brent. The plaque had already been removed. The desk was wiped clean, a blank slate. Fitting. There was a man already seated on the guest couch, older, polished, wearing an Elevare lapel pin that only the board members ever wore. He stood, extended a hand. Gerald Takano, interim board liaison. I shook his hand. Lisa Harper. We've reviewed your report, he said. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. You didn't just uncover fraud. You traced patterns, followed vendor trails, even projected future liabilities. Do you have a background in forensic auditing? I smiled. Number just a background in being underestimated. He chuckled. Well, it worked in our favor. Then his expression grew serious. You're stepping into chaos. Legal's involved. Finance is bleeding. Half the department heads are either resigning or lawyering up. Morale is in freefall. Can you handle that? I met his gaze. I've been handling it for years, just without the title. He nodded once. Then it's yours. Officially. He handed me a leather-bound folder. Inside, contract, terms, interim vice president of operations. I signed it on the spot. Click. Pen down. Everything changed. By noon, I was in the war room, where just a week ago, I wasn't even invited to meetings. Now, I was running them. A team of 5 department leads sat around the table, stiff and uncertain. I recognized most of them. They were the ones who used to avoid eye contact when Brent snapped his fingers. I started simply. I know what you're all thinking, I said. You're wondering how long this lasts, whether this is real, if I'm just a placeholder until the board finds someone safer. No one spoke. I'm not here to convince you with words, I continued. I'm here to stabilize the company, to fix what they broke, to clean the blood off the floor and remind everyone that Elevare still has a future. I paused, letting the silence settle. Brent, Dana, and the rest, they built a culture of fear and favoritism. That's over. From now on, no more closed-door clubs, no more real leaders only. We rise together, or we don't rise at all. Still silence. Then one of the leads, Carmen from compliance, slowly nodded. You've got my vote. Mine too, someone else added. The others followed. For the first time in days, the room felt alive. We moved fast, re-audited every major vendor, froze all non-essential expenses, launched a transparent reporting system with real-time approvals. By 3 p.m., I'd personally called every major client affected by the scandal. I didn't send them to PR. I didn't read from a script. I spoke like a human being. I apologized. Took ownership. Promised better. And you know what? Most of them stayed. Because when you've been lied to by polished suits and corporate doublespeak, authenticity becomes the most valuable currency in the room. As the sun began to set, I found myself alone in Brent's old office. My office now. I looked out over the skyline. The city lights flickering on one by one. Below me, Elevare kept moving. Calls being made, reports being filed, systems running. The company hadn't collapsed. It had evolved. My phone buzzed. A message from Andrea. DOJ just called. They've opened a formal investigation into Dana and Brent. You were right about everything. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Good. Let me know if they need anything else. I locked the phone and set it aside. Because the real work was just beginning. They tried to exile me. Instead, I became their reckoning. And from this moment forward, no one would forget the name Lisa Harper. 2 weeks. That's how long it took to steady the ship. 2 weeks of 14-hour days, non-stop meetings, back-to-back damage control calls, and enough legal briefings to make my head spin. But we did it. The bleeding slowed. The clients calmed down. The investors? Still cautious, but watching closely. And me? I was no longer the interim anything. The board made it official. I was named Vice President of Operations. No asterisks, no footnotes. The same people who once laughed at me in hallways now greeted me with tight smiles and 2 eager nods. My inbox was suddenly full of congrats messages from colleagues who'd never responded to a single email before. Funny how quickly respect shows up once power enters the room. But the truth? I didn't trust it. Respect that arrives after you win isn't respect. It's self-preservation. And something about the way people moved around me now felt off. Not afraid. Not hostile. Just too careful. Like they were waiting to see if I'd really changed things. Or if I'd just become the new version of the old problem. It was a Friday evening when it all shifted again. Everyone had gone home. The executive floor was dark, quiet, except for the soft hum of machines and the glow of city lights beyond the glass walls. I stayed late, catching up on final approvals, sipping cold coffee that had once been hot. That's when I saw the email. No subject, no sender, just one line in the body. Watch your back. Not everyone's happy with your promotion. My chest tightened. Not fear, not exactly. More like alertness, like a cold current under the skin. I checked the metadata, scrubbed clean. No trace. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to cover their steps. I didn't reply. Didn't forward it. I just sat there for a while, staring at the screen. And suddenly, I remembered something Andrea had said during our first meeting. Something about how removing Brent and Dana wouldn't be the end. It would just peel back the next layer. Because when corruption goes that deep, it's never just 2 people. It's roots. Systems. A network. And I just stepped into its spotlight. That night, I drove home slower than usual. Watched the mirrors. Checked the license plates behind me. Paranoia? Maybe. But paranoia kept people alive in this game. When I got home, I locked every door, pulled the curtains, poured a whiskey I didn't really want, and pulled out the old laptop, the one I'd used to compile the original evidence. Still intact, still encrypted, still secure. I opened it just to be sure. And what I saw made my blood run cold. A folder, one I hadn't created. Whispers inside it, logs, messages, dozens of them, private Slack chats, deleted internal threads, confidential memos forwarded from anonymous accounts. It was a full trail, a digital whisper network of employees, mostly junior staff, assistants, lower-level managers, quietly documenting everything. Expenses, meetings, off-the-record conversations. One message read, Dana told procurement to bury the fake vendor invoices. They're hiding it in facility ops now. Another. They said Lisa's getting too loud. That she's useful for now but won't last. And one that stopped me cold. I heard them say she'll either be promoted out or burned out. Their words, not mine. I leaned back, breathing slowly. This wasn't just about me. It never was. Brent and Dana? They were the face. But behind them was an entire culture designed to grind people down, use them up, push them out the moment they stopped being convenient. And I wasn't the only one they'd targeted. I was just the only one who fought back. Until now. Until this. I copied the entire folder, backed it up twice, then sent an encrypted message to Andrea. We need to talk. I think the rabbit hole goes deeper than we thought. Within minutes, she replied, I'm coming over. By 9 p.m., she was in my living room, reading through the logs on my kitchen counter, her face turning grayer by the second. These people aren't just greedy, she muttered. They're calculated. They've been manipulating internal promotions, vendor contracts, even HR investigations, I nodded. And if they know I'm onto them, they'll strike first. She looked at me. So what do you want to do? I stared out the window. The city was still humming out there, unaware that another war was quietly unfolding inside Elevare's polished glass walls. What I've always done, I said. Expose them. All of them. Andrea hesitated. That'll trigger a second wave, bigger than before. Then we prepare, I said, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reckoning. For every person they silenced, for every career they buried, for every woman they told, you're not a real leader. This time, they wouldn't see it coming. Monday arrived like thunder. By 9 a.m., every department head had received a formal request from compliance. Submit all vendor contracts and expense reports from the past 12 months. Full transparency, no redactions. No one said it aloud, but the message was clear. Something was happening. Again. And I was at the center of it. The whispers returned. I could feel them trailing me down the hall, slipping between doorways, skimming just beneath fake smiles. She's doing it again. Another sweep? Who does she think she is? But this time, I didn't care, because I wasn't cleaning up after corruption anymore. I was burning it out, root and stem. That morning, Andrea and I presented the Whispers folder to the Internal Risk Committee. The room was ice cold. Everyone knew something serious was coming, but they didn't expect what they saw on the screen. Memos, screenshots, patterns, promotions offered, then revoked. Salaries capped below male counterparts with less experience. Vendor deals rerouted to shell companies owned by executives' relatives. One by one, names appeared. Some I expected, some I didn't. And some were still sitting in that very room. By the time we were done, the silence was deafening. No one moved. No one blinked. Then Gerald Takano, the board liaison, stood slowly. This company, he said, voice low, owes you more than an apology, Ms. Harper. I didn't reply. I just opened the next file. The termination recommendations, 7 names, senior executives, mid-tier managers, 1 HR director. One by one, I listed their offenses. Not just financial fraud, but retaliation, harassment, abuse of power. By the end of it, no one questioned the list. They only questioned how it had gone unnoticed for so long. When the meeting ended, Gerald pulled me aside. Lisa, if you ever want a board seat... I cut him off. Not yet. I'm not done building. He nodded, understanding. Then take what you need. You've earned it. But I didn't go back to my office after that. Instead, I walked down to the second floor, to a department most executives forgot existed. Operations support. The people who actually kept Elevare running. I passed rows of cubicles, heads buried in spreadsheets and support queues. Most of them didn't notice me. A few glanced up, puzzled. I stopped at a small desk near the back. The nameplate read, Jasmine Lin, Logistics Coordinator. She looked up, startled. VP Harper? Is something wrong? I smiled. Number I came to thank you. Her brow furrowed. For what? For the file labeled Whispers. Her eyes widened, lips parted like she might deny it. I raised a hand. You were smart to stay anonymous, but I know it was you. She said nothing, so I continued. You saved this company, Jasmine. You kept the receipts when no one else dared. You documented what the rest of them tried to bury. You reminded me I wasn't alone. Tears welled in her eyes, fast and hot. She blinked hard, trying to compose herself. They said if I spoke up, I'd be blacklisted forever, she whispered. I almost believed them. They were wrong, I said. I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, a formal promotion offer, salary bump, relocation options, a guaranteed seat on the Internal Ethics Committee. She stared at it, stunned. You're not invisible anymore, I said. You're the new blueprint. I left her like that, speechless, trembling, holding proof that integrity still mattered. By that afternoon, the company buzzed with a different energy. 7 executives were escorted out under quiet HR supervision. No dramatic firings, no finger-pointing, just a clean sweep, swift and undeniable. And me? I sat in the very same boardroom I'd once been denied access to. Not to beg, not to prove myself, but to lead. As the final presentations wrapped, someone leaned over and asked, "Will you be attending the executive retreat this year?" I smiled. Only if we hold it in the operations center. Let the real heroes see the ocean view for once. Laughter rippled through the room, but not mocking, not smug. Respect? It had taken everything. Every betrayal, every sleepless night, every whispered threat, to get here. But now I was here, and I wasn't going anywhere. Later that week, HR unveiled a new program, Leadership Transparency Initiative, anonymous reporting, equity audits, mandatory ethics training for all managers. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't fix everything overnight. But it was a start, a real one. And as I left the building that Friday evening, I walked past the lobby where it all began, where I once stood invisible, excluded from a dinner that supposedly defined real leadership. Funny. They thought power was found behind mahogany doors and catered banquets. But I learned the truth the hard way. Real leaders don't build empires on silence. They rise in the ashes of those who did. And they make damn sure the next generation never gets told, "You don't belong here." Not on their watch. Not ever again.